Francis Kaluraq was one of the first Baker Lake sculptors singled out for special attention in the early 1960s. Sculptures by him were reproduced in both books by George Swinton and in other publications. But Kaluraq was never a prolific sculptor. We just don't see many examples of his work. And he switched to printmaking in the 1970s before retiring from art making altogether. But his works from the early 1960s must have been very influential because to my eyes they have a classic Baker Lake look that we associate with the early to mid 1970s. So to me, this is like the prototype of the Baker Lake classic style from maybe 8 to 10 years later. Once you see a couple of sculptures by Kaluraq, his style is immediately recognizable. Notice the relatively large scale and the bulky, sometimes almost blocky proportions, and especially the broad, flattened facial features with highly distinctive forehead and nose that to me look remarkably like an ulu blade and handle. Standing in Mother and Child is a particularly fine work by Kaluraq. Her proportions are certainly sturdy, but they're not blocky or crude. And the faces of both the mother and the child are carved simply but with finesse, and we don't always see that. A lot of the time, the mother's face receives a lot of attention, but the baby's face is very minimally carved. We love the mother's smiling mouth and eyes. They make a beautiful contrast to her more severe brow and her chin. And see how her V neckline frames that impressive Jay Leno chin. Just below that are the subtle diamond shapes that maybe look like nipples but are actually the ivory or antler toggles that in real life would fasten the straps that help to hold up the weight of her baby. And look at the sculpture from the side. See how the slightly forward tilt of the figure appears almost delicate, with lovely crisp lines that define the mother's arms, her hood, and her hemlines. It's a wonderful sculpture by a great early Baker Lake master.